With all the advancements and advantages that come with joining the Alpha Quadrant power of the United Federation of Planets, why wouldn't a species want to join? Hi, Rick here, looking at reasons why joining the UFP may not be in the best interests for an alien species. If you're looking for reasons to sign up, then there should already be a companion video to this one covering a variety of benefits, but we're here to play devil's advocate. So to begin with, there is often a lot of misconception about how militarized and rigid the Federation is. This stems in no small part from its own processes. Starfleet, by its very nature, is often the first point of contact with a new alien species, and as the Federation's largest fleeted organisation, often acts as courier, ambassador and enforcer for the organisation. Starfleet is itself run in a militaristic fashion, complete with uniforms, ranks, designations and serial numbers. And, as many species only a reference point for the UFP, shapes their entire experience of the group. Plus a very high percentage of Starfleet is human, with many of its assets, Utopia Planitia, Starfleet Academy, all being in the Sol system. So this also adds to the notion that the entire Federation is a human-centric organisation. So these opinions may dissuade many from approaching the UFP with membership in mind. But there are some very real reasons to abstain, leave or even oppose this power too. The first and the biggest option that comes to mind is probably the most obvious reason to steer clear. Joining the Federation means committing yourself to a higher authority. Although the laws set out in the Federation Charter try to outline a way of life that protects individual liberties and the freedoms of a planet's native government, the laws it created to enforce this are not optional in most cases. Now, a lot of these rules simply boil down to don't disrespect other cultures, but that's a fairly obvious conclusion for a fledgling interstellar power to come to by themselves. Angering another species isn't exactly conclusive to creating diplomatic ties, but why would you need an entire higher governmental structure to tell you to do that? The red tape that inevitably surrounds things like trade and commerce in the Federation space, while ruling out smuggling of sentient organisms, prohibits the exchange of many other items. Legitimate traders often find themselves on the receiving end of inquisitive Starfleet vessels, adding to the delays and costs to their schedule, not to mention Romulan ale being confiscated. Hell, with the Federation around, it's a bad idea to trade with the Romulans at all. Here's a point. Why is Romulan ale banned? Is it too strong, too narcotic? No, it's confiscated routinely, simply because the Federation has been at war with the Romulans, and all goods of Romulan origin are under heavy embargo established with the formation of the neutral zone. If your government has ties with organisations such as the Orion Syndicate, you can expect strict regulation in Federation involvement if you were a member, potentially severing ties with their entire syndicate because of the most unjust aspects to their business practices. In theory, the UFP doesn't tell you which governments you can ally with, but in practice, this highlights a much larger problem too. The Federation is 217 years old and it has made a lot of enemies. They cite security and unification as one of their principles, but have come into conflict with almost every other major political power in the Alpha Quadrant. Look at this map. The Romulans were an enemy of humanity since pre-Federation days and remain antagonistic to this day. An enemy you would inherit if full Federation membership was attained. Then we have the Cardassian Union, which has fought the UFP twice in recent history, in both the Border Wars and as a member of the Dominion. The Dominion, a superpower from the Gamma Quadrant that had to pass through a cosmic choke point into our local corner and still brought the Federation to its knees. And it's not an isolated story. The Federation-Klingon War, the Borg making a beeline straight for Sector 001 bypassing all of those defences, even technologically limited species such as the Talarians view the Federation as an enemy force, having frequently ambushed and destroyed its far superior adversaries. Does this paint a good image of Starfleet, the Federation's security force? How are they to protect all their member races, especially those on the frontier of its territory? Bajor was considering Federation membership after driving the Cardassians off its homeworld, and eventually their petition would be accepted. However, when the Dominion showed up, Benjamin Sisko himself suggested that the Bajoran people sign a non-aggression pact with the Gamma Quadrant power, otherwise they would be considered an enemy by association. Starfleet and the Federation have at their disposal many advancements in technology, not just militaristic, but medical, agricultural and general shortcuts like replication, holosuites and transporters. And they preach cooperation, and they share this technology. But where were they while Bajor was under Cardassian occupation? with the Prime Directive forbid their interference. Sure, Bajor ended up benefiting from the Federation's assistance after their culture had been irreparably damaged by the boot of its occupiers, but they ended up a UFP member, so the Federation could be seen to be simply serving in its own interests. The Federation offers up humanitarian aid routinely, but would also stand by and watch entire civilizations potentially die off if they don't meet the standards for intervention. Either way, could you do that? Stand by and watch as a species suffered through a crisis while you had the means to help them? On the flip side, you may not want to render aid to another species, but due to the Federation's increasingly complicated and flexible when it suits them humanitarian laws, you are forced to. Your planet's resources diverted to a relief effort that's beyond your control. Or perhaps you'll simply have to give up your own land to the enemy as part of some peace treaty. This is what happened to the Marquis, Federation citizens who were forced to concede their entire planets to Cardassian control at the end of the Border Wars. Despite Starfleet having rules against forced relocation, this was essentially what it was suggesting the colonists do. Their complaints fell on deaf ears, and in the end they rebelled against the United Federation of Planets. They were then disavowed by Starfleet entirely and branded traitors, engaging in their own campaign to liberate their homes from Cardassian control. Many of the Marquis are able to wage this guerrilla war because they were Starfleet officers who defected. This proves one thing: despite the unity and harmony that the Federation ideals present, its people, on the ground level, are just as divided as any. Many of the criteria for joining the United Federation of Planets encourage diversity, but the fear of losing one's cultural identity is still a very real one. Sure, the United Federation of Planets doesn't force homogenization, but by its nature as an interplanetary alliance there's going to be an exchange of societies, goods and ideas, and some cultural contamination is inevitable. Not saying that this is a good or a bad thing in of itself, but perhaps simply an unforeseen or unwanted side effect. A planet's culture too may not be adaptable enough for the Federation, who frowns upon any caste-based societal structure, even if it's integral to your way of life. This would bar you from membership in the UFP altogether. Your culture's philosophies may simply be incompatible with those of the Federation. Just ask the Klingons. Their civilization is thousands of years old, and they are regulated by their 24 great houses, a caste-based system that has regulated their aggressive behaviour throughout history. And saying that, look at their territory compared to the size of the Federation's. One species compared to 183 working in unison. Same with the Romulans, the Cardassians and many other races. These other powers are all as expansive as they are due to their top dog mentality of expansion. The Romulans have established an empire beginning with the oppression of the Riemann people, but its no-nonsense attitude and extensive intelligence network have allowed it to expand through political leverage and military might. The Cardassian Union pushes ever outwards, its state-first mentality indoctrinating and controlling. And the Klingons are a culture of warriors. They always seek challenge, which leads them to naturally expand. However, they are surprisingly adept at diplomacy when needed. All of these represent alternative methods of expansion based on radically different philosophies, and one of these methods may better suit a rising power than the often bureaucratic Federation. Working together for a common goal of betterment may be a noble cause, but when doing so involves juggling the wants and needs of 183 species and over 7,000 other homeworlds, making your voice heard can often take considerable effort, and sometimes it's quicker to go it alone. For all its utopian ideals, the United Federation of Planets is flawed. While it is never downright oppressive, its diversity brings with it a multitude of cultures and facets, each with an individual shard. But like glass, you can fit the pieces together, but the divides remain. And when you look into the cracks, you'll see all sorts of inadequacies, like those that led to the formation of the Marquis, and contradictions. Thing is, each species has its needs dealt with in its own way, and this means that such hypocrisy is often necessary to maintain order. It's a complicated, nuanced, messy affair, and at the end of the day, your species or planet may simply want to go it alone, to explore space for yourself, to tackle the challenges of the final frontier in all their forms without worrying about interference from some vastly removed power whose concerns are often tied up in maintaining its own tangled web. Thanks for listening. As I've already said, I personally think that the pros of the UFP outweigh its faults, but I can see why other species may choose to stand back from the organisation. And that'll about wrap it up. Sorry for the delay. I know I said a couple of days, but I wasn't satisfied with the original script and I had to rewrite it. But thanks for being patient. And until the next video, I leave you with a question. If the Federation was not an option, then which species would you join or establish ties with, if any? Because I really struggled to find an answer to this one. Thanks again, and goodbye.